The Supreme System Lord was the highest title a System Lord could hold. They are a System Lord who would have, well, been supreme, the most powerful System Lord and leader of the Goa'uld Empire. Throughout the history of the Empire, there was only ever one System Lord who ever held that title, Ra. Now there were one or two dominant Goa'uld who ruled the Empire/quasi-Empire before Ra. This comes from the RPG books in case you're wondering. But none ever held the title before or after Ra's death. The closest was Baal when he tried to name himself Supreme Commander of the entire System Lord domain, but that just doesn't have the same ring to it as Supreme System Lord, and this didn't happen till 9 years after Ra's death. It's so interesting that no System Lord ever rose to take the title, because I think you could argue that the lack of a dominant System Lord who ruled over the Empire is what ultimately led to the fall of the Empire. Not trying to degrade the efforts of Earth and its allies, but they did rely heavily on the feudal nature of the System Lords when dealing with them. I think if there was some kind of dominant System Lord, they would have helped the Empire to have a figurehead to unite behind against the numerous threats that were coming after the death of Ra, such as the rise of the Tari, the Tok'ra, Jaffa Rebellion, Sokar, Asgard Anubis, and the Replicators. Now, the reasons why no System Lord ever rose to claim the title was most likely due to the Goa'uld's feudal nature and no System Lord having the military capability to push their dominance over the others. If one tried to do this, the others would probably team up on them and put them down. However, we did see the High Council of the System Lords try and hold a summit to deal with the power vacuum left behind after the death of very powerful System Lords like Apophis and Kronos. Maybe the sudden death of Ra brings about a new fear that they too will be killed suddenly by some new enemy. So I pose the question/scenario. What in the aftermath of Ra's death, the System Lords came together and actually picked a new leader, a new Supreme System Lord. Now keep in mind, I'm talking about the immediate aftermath of Ra's death, so while I think Baal was the best System Lord and came the closest to somewhat being in the same position as Ra, from what we understand in the extended lore, he really only came into power after Ra's death, claiming some of Ra's old territory. And even if we discard that, we don't really see him till Season 5, a good 6 years after Ra's death. Now, out of universe, the reason we don't see him sooner is that, well, he wasn't written yet. But in universe, I think it would be safe to assume that while a powerful System Lord, Baal was not powerful enough to be one of the big players. Again, the meeting in which we first see him is the remaining System Lords after the death of the other major players in the Empire. After doing some research, I've narrowed down the list of possible candidates to 3: Apophis, Kronos, and heru'ur. Yes, I finally learned how to pronounce his name. You can all stop commenting about it in the comments section. Actually, I want to start with him first because I find him the most interesting candidate. He has 2 qualifications for the job. First is that he is Ra's son, heir to the throne, and we know some Goa'uld do practice some form of monarchy. His second qualification is that he controls one of the largest fleets in the Empire, so not only does he have a claim to the throne, but he can actually back up said claim with military force. That being said, I do think there's one problem with him that would make other Goa'uld not want him to be leader, besides him being a very much feared System Lord even among the other Goa'ulds. Because really you can apply that to almost all of the major System Lords. You see, unlike many other Goa'uld, he very much is a rule from the front kind of person. And I mean that he likes to fight alongside his Jaffa on the front line and saw them as his comrades rather than cannon fodder. I kind of get Charles the 12th vibes from him, which can be an issue if he ends up dying like Charles did, aka on the battlefield. To me, this shows him to be a leader who doesn't mind doing hard work, but for the leader of an empire, that's not really a good thing to be on the front line, since if he did die, we would be right back where we started. Now, a possible reason he does this is he may be younger compared to some of the other System Lords, and maybe going through a quote-unquote phase to try and prove himself. Which could be a problem since if you remember, he did invade Cimmeria, a protected planet under the Empire's treaty with the Asgard. Now, a single System Lord invading a protected planet is one thing, but the Supreme System Lord doing it?
Do the words political storm mean anything to you?
Granted, the Asgard couldn't go to war with the Empire due to their war with the Replicators, but most Goa'uld at the time didn't know this and were still afraid of the Asgard. But these are the actions of someone who doesn't really think that far ahead, and I can see the Goa'uld not wanting him to be a leader who's going to rock the boat and take the risk of dying on the field, which is something I can see him doing. Apophis is also interesting since he may also have a claim to the throne, as he and Ra were brothers. Now, I couldn't find the scene in which this was said. I remember Teal'c being the one who said it, but again, I couldn't find the scene, and after going to both YouTube and Reddit on the subject, it seems like I may be misremembering something, as most people seem to say this came from a director's cut of Children of the Gods, which I don't own and can't confirm this claim. But both Gateworld and fandom agree that they were brothers, so going forward, I'm going to consider it being true. So not only does he have a claim to the throne like heru'ur, but similar to his nephew, he is a powerful system lord. Or was he? See, after doing some research on the subject, I have to wonder how powerful Apophis really was. I have no doubt he was a big name among the Goa'uld, but in regards to military strength, I wonder if he was lacking compared to other system lords. I say this because after his failed attack on Earth, in which he lost 2 attack motherships and a large number of his Serpent Guard, this was enough to weaken his standing among the other system lords and encouraged heru'ur and Sokar into attacking him. I don't doubt losing 2 ships and at least 2 armies is a massive loss, but thanks to the RPG book, we know that Lord Yu had at least 16 ships. I have to assume Apophis would have had to have more than Yu if he was able to maintain his rivalry with Kronos, who we know has more ships than Yu. The only reason I can think that losing 2 ships was enough for the rest of the system lords to turn on him is he had less military strength compared to others. Similar to his nephew, he seems to go out on the front lines with his Jaffa, such as when he traveled to the Nox's world or when he traveled to Earth looking for a host for his mate. But this seems more like him going out looking for things to expand his power, rather than the purpose for fighting. Thanks to some lore, we know originally he commanded a minor fleet in the Empire, but eventually grew it over time. So it's possible that again, he was in a lesser position and kind of had to work to get up, but was still not as powerful compared to other system lords. Yes, he would later come to stand as the dominant system lord, but that was only after taking control of Sokar's and heru'ur's fleets, essentially taking control of things he didn't work for or build, which yes is a very Goa'uld thing to do, but that wouldn't happen for some time, and as such when deciding a new Supreme System Lord, he might not have the political or military clout to take control. So we have a candidate for Supreme System Lord who has a claim to the throne and has some name recognition as a powerful system lord, but seemingly lacks military might and was looking for ways to increase his own standing due to such shortcomings. Finally, we get to Kronos, who sadly there's not much to say, but the stuff we do have is really important. Teal'c said he was one of the most influential system lords, not only being one to formally banish Sokar even when Ra was still alive, but Daniel theorizes that since Kronos and Apophis were rivals, that Kronos used his influence to prevent the rest of the system lords from joining in Apophis' attack on Earth. Thanks to the Living Gods RPG book, we do know a bit about his military, at least in comparison to Yu.
Me? Yu is the name of the Goa'uld.
While Kronos had an impressive military and access to resources, his volatile aggression often led him to making foolhardy decisions on the battlefield, something Yu took advantage of and used superior strategies when fighting him that usually ended in a stalemate between the two. And we do see something like this on screen when he sent Teal'c's father to win an impossible battle and killed him for failing, which led to Teal'c wanting to become First Prime to Apophis and arguably put him on the path to rebel against the Goa'uld, or even him possibly keeping the other system lords from joining in the attack on Earth. If they did, they could have wiped out the Tari before they became a major threat. But because of his own hatred of Apophis and probably thinking the Tari were no real threat, you could say he had a guiding hand in the downfall of the Empire. We also learn that Kronos was often in conflict with other system lords and never gained their support, which might not make much sense if he was supposed to be one of the most influential system lords, but I think this means his influence comes from his military might, which he used to press other less powerful system lords into getting his way. But the ones who can stand up to him militarily are the ones he's in conflict with. So we have a candidate with a lot of influence that derives from his military might, but can be reckless in battle and has a tendency to develop rivalries with other powerful Goa'uld. And so, after looking over the evidence, I would say the next Supreme System Lord is heru'ur. Yep, I'm doing the guy whose name I can't really pronounce. Why? Well, on top of all the other pros I mentioned about him before, I think heru'ur has something that the other two candidates and really the rest of the System Lords lack. It has been stated multiple times that the Goa'uld Empire was incredibly feudal and prone to infighting, and I think part of the reason for this, beyond the Goa'uld's selfish nature, was due to a lack of expansion. In a quick comparison to another science fiction empire, the Klingon Empire of Star Trek, it is said a few times that they need to expand outwards because when they don't, their great houses turn upon one another and fight for dominance. I think the same is true for the Goa'uld. Their empire is past its time of expansion, and many system lords, including a Kronos Apophis, are seemingly only interested in keeping the status quo, or increasing their own power. Yes, they go out and find new worlds to conquer, but they are also seemingly more interested in taking worlds away from other system lords. Now, to be clear, I am not saying heru'ur is some kind of revolutionary leader out for the greater good of the Empire. He isn't. Like at all. He has the same selfish tendencies as all the other Goa'uld and is feared by many. But what he has is a desire to conquer new worlds in person. I know I joked about it earlier, but he invaded a protected planet, something that as far as the Goa'uld knew could have sparked a war with the Asgard. Even if the defenses were down, it takes some courage, or stupidity, to invade a protected planet and risk war with the Asgard. Had it not been for the intervention of SG-1, the Asgard might not even have learned about this, and heru'ur could have successfully taken control of the planet. Now imagine if heru'ur did this with the full might of the Empire and invaded every protected planet, or at least more than the Asgard could realistically defend. The Asgard's bluff would have been called and could have possibly been pushed out of the galaxy by the Goa'uld once it became clear that the Asgard couldn't stop them. Any protected planet left would be invaded, and Earth would probably be the next target. Earth has the largest human population in the Milky Way, as well as being the ones who killed Ra. This puts a giant target on their back, and without the Asgard's protection, odds are Earth would fall. Unless, SG-1 manages to MacGyver their way out of this, but we will get to that later. So, heru'ur has taken out the Asgard, the Tari, and has a semi-positive relationship with his Jaffa, which could have stopped or at least mitigated the Jaffa rebellion, leaving only two major threats to the Empire: the Tok'ra, who in all honesty couldn't really do anything beyond their usual tactics, which tend to be very long-term; Sokar, who admittedly with his large fleet would have been an issue, but with the full might of all the system lords and heru'ur being a warrior, they could have possibly defeated, leaving only Anubis and the Replicators as the real major threats. Though to be fair, I don't think any system lord could deal with these threats, and given how the timeline has changed, who knows if even they would become threats in the near future. As of right now, the Empire is expanding out, conquering new worlds, or retaking control of worlds that had been abandoned years prior. So the Empire is in good hands, right? Sure, heru'ur is a jerk like the rest of his race, but he's expanding the Empire. Everything's good, right? Well, no, actually, there's two issues to consider. First is SG-1's tendency to pull off the impossible. Like I mentioned earlier, they could find a way to MacGyver their way out of heru'ur invading Earth. Maybe given heru'ur's ruthlessness and his tendency to eliminate all who dare in his shadow, including other Goa'uld, SG-1 maybe could have convinced the other system lords to turn on him. Which leads to the second issue, the Goa'uld's feudal nature. I know I said him leading the Empire on a conquering quest could have helped unify the Empire, and I think it would, but old habits die hard, and I think at some point a system lord, or maybe a group of them, would try and challenge heru'ur for leadership. We saw something very similar to Baal in Continuum. Again, I think Baal was the best system lord since he came the closest to defeating Earth by changing the timeline, and right as he's about to win, he gets betrayed by his queen. And this really would have happened to any system lord who rose to become the dominant one regardless of the title they took. I think it just shows that no matter who took power in the Empire, well, the Empire was always kind of doomed. And it didn't really matter who became the next Supreme System Lord after Ra's death. However, if there had to be a timeline where someone could have pulled the Empire together, even for a little bit longer than the one we saw on our screens, I think that heru'ur would have been the one to do it. But what do you think? Do you think Apophis or Kronos would have made better picks for Supreme System Lord? Or do you think there was someone else in the aftermath of Ra's death who could have pulled the Empire together? Tell me your thoughts in the comments below, leave a like and subscribe, and remember,
kneel before your god.
God is Thor. He taught us to stand as equals.
Your god cannot help you now. Only I can.